On to your claim that that revision helped Biden hurt you for the 800,000. It was in August. There was still plenty of time for voters to see that those weren't real jobs.
After the election in November, I believe it was in November something. There was a massive revision downward on jobs.
The first one, the 800,000 or 900,000, I think, was in August, and then later it came out in March of 2025. It went to 598, not 818. But the original one.
Well, listen, 598. But there were other revisions downward from prior to the election because the numbers were rigged. Okay, and as you said, the number. Look, you take a look after the election. How many revisions downward there were? But let's get back to Texas.
So that was Donald Trump screwing up a phone interview on CNBC so spectacularly that he was getting relentlessly fact-checked by a visibly uncomfortable pro-MAGA, pro-Trump CNBC anchor, Joe Kernan. The guy who was fact-checking him is pro-Trump, defends Trump all the time on CNBC's Squawk Box. But that's how terrible and dishonest and stupid Trump was during the course of this interview. And you even see it at the end. After being humiliated on live TV, Trump tries desperately to change the subject. And there's more where that came from. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, folks, Donald Trump just seems like every subsequent interview is worse than the last. This one I found particularly interesting because it put this older guy here, Joe Kernan, in a really difficult position. We've done interviews, or rather we've done videos about Squawk Box and Kernan in the past. He bends over backwards to grade Trump on a curve, but Trump's economy is so disastrous. The tariff rollout has been terrible. The recent firing of the BLS commissioner, even Joe Kernan is trying to guide Trump out of this. So we're going to play these clips and unpack it together.
And certainly suboptimal, but rigged? Where do you get the notion that it's rigged, or do you have any evidence there?
It is antiquated, but it's also very political. And, I had an election recently where I did very well, won every swing state, won the popular vote, won everything, all right? Won all the counties. It's, I think, 87% of the counties were Republican up. That's never happened before. And yet I had to go through hell. And just days before the election, they put out numbers that it was like the country was on fire. It was doing so well. And then they did a revision about 2 weeks later, and the revision was down by almost 900,000 jobs. You remember that?
So again, this is what Kernan was talking about in the first clip. Trump's he's just flatly wrong about the timeline. He's either wrong or lying about it. Either way, it's not good. The revisions were made in August, and August comes before November. November is when the election was held. And by the way, even if you control for the downward revisions, which obviously made Biden's record look weaker than it had been, Biden's record on jobs is still better than Trump's record on jobs compared to term one, even if you control for COVID. So it doesn't change the underlying fundamentals at all, other than it proves that Biden's BLS was willing to downward revise his numbers, even at the political consequence on Biden's watch. It's not political. It's an apolitical process, or at least it was until about 3 days ago. And then Trump fired the BLS commissioner. And now it could be irretrievably political.
And I said, what would have happened? What would have happened if I lost? Think of it. I would have said they gave phony numbers and then they revised them a week and a half later.
Those were benchmark numbers, though, Mr. President. That happens. They do that. They do that twice a year. And it reconciles the monthly figures with like the overall numbers, and it was a big number. And obviously,
but the numbers were rigged. The numbers were rigged. Biden wasn't doing well; he was doing poorly. They announced these phenomenal numbers 2 days before the election, and a little bit before that. Always these great numbers, and you knew it wasn't doing well.
Trump's trying to, you knew. I mean, Joe, you're smart enough to know that Biden was terrible and everything was bad. And then under me, it just changed in 24 hours and it's amazing. Except when stuff is still bad, then it's either fake or still like Biden's fault. Like, you know that, Joe. But you could see how uncomfortable. I mean, kudos to Kernan for calling him out on this. But you can see how uncomfortable he hates this because this is humiliating, not just for Trump, but for Kernan himself. Because the other co-hosts of CNBC are like, this is the guy that you constantly praise and you prefer to be president. You're having to hold his hand and walk him through the most basic shit because he's too stupid or dishonest to get through it himself. It's embarrassing. Here's another clip.
Elaine Chao was on yesterday, and I know, she was, I think she was labor secretary for 8 years under Bush too, and she was your transportation secretary as well. And she said, the commissioner doesn't really even get involved with the actual minutia of putting all these things together. And there's no way that it could have been, that she could have chosen to rig these numbers to make them look bad. And these are statistical changes based on this antiquated system, and it's just a big leap to go to rigged. And then it also, Mr. President, it makes anyone you pick is going to be, critics are going to say, hey, he's picking a guy that's going to give him or a gal that's giving him the numbers that he wants. So it undermines confidence in the system to some extent.
Love it. Love that this push, again, he's uncomfortable. He hates having to say this because Kernan is realizing in real time that Trump is more dishonest by far and dumber by far than any Democratic president in the history of this nation. And yet he's trying to help him out. He's like, listen, if you do this, it's going to feed the perception not only that you can't handle bad news, but now everyone will have the total right to question all of your numbers. So if you put in a MAGA cultist here and you get good numbers, people like me, we're going to be relentlessly questioning that because you've given us the opportunity and the motive to do so because we have no reason to believe your numbers moving forward. You've irretrievably politicized it. And remember, the Federal Reserve, which sets fiscal policy, which sets monetary policy with respect to inflation, they rely on data provided by the BLS. So does capital investiture from the private sector. This has enormous ripple effects, enormous potential consequences for the rest of the economy downstream. That's why Kernan is panicked.
You had, according to many people, all the rights in the world to try to replace a commissioner when it's hasn't gotten any better. But that is maybe a bridge too far, according to most people.
Well, I think when somebody says the commissioner is not involved, I don't want to get into any arguments with anybody. Why should I? She's a very nice woman.
Exactly.
But when they say that that nobody was involved, that it wasn't political, give me a break. Look, before the election, I had this massive outflow of beauty for Biden. I mean, he didn't know he was alive.
And again, it just goes back to the Biden numbers. The Biden numbers are really good even after the revisions. These revisions are common. They happened before the election. So to the extent that these revisions would cast aspersions on Biden's economy, as Kernan himself points out, it happened weeks in advance before the election, which means people were able to factor that in. That may have been a reason why Trump was able to defeat Kamala Harris in the election, because people thought, to whatever extent they had mixed feelings about Biden's economy, there's like, well, it's even weaker on jobs than we expected. What are you talking about, man? What are you complaining about? He's just too stupid or too dishonest. But here's another clip.
We talked earlier that the unemployment rate is still low. It's 4.2%.
It's fine. I'm not saying earth-shattering. I will say this. The numbers before the election were earth-shattering. I'm not saying these were earth-shattering. But then they announced a couple of 100,000 to make it look a little bit worse from, months before. I said, where did those numbers come from? So
for as much as you want
to, it's a highly political situation. It's totally rigged. Smart people know it. People with common sense know it. And a lot of people to keep their head under the covers. And
so Kernan's like, I can't do this. Kernan's trying to stop him, interrupting him. He's like, we got to keep going on. So it's so embarrassing. But it's not just about the BLS commissioner. Trump is also lying about other aspects of his economy and has to get fact-checked by Kernan in real time.
We were in such bad shape when I took over. Eggs had tripled in price. More than that. Everything was up, and prices are down, and it bugs me. I looked at CNN the other night, which is a failing deal. It's got no ratings, and I'm probably the only guy watching. And I watched these guys talking about, well, with Trump, prices are up. No, prices are down since I came in. Down. All prices just about, except for the price of stock. The price of stock is way up, okay? But prices are down. And if you look at energy, I'll give you an example. Joe, look at energy.
Some of them, but
energy is way down. Energy is down to $2.20 a gallon now for a car. It's down to a level you're...
So he's fact-checked there, too. Like, no, you're even wrong about that. He's always lying about gas prices. He's been doing that since he was reelected. Let's see. A couple of other clips. Here's one in which I'm blanking on this guy's name. Oh, why? Because I get him confused with. It's not Aaron Sorkin, who's the creator of The West Wing. It's Andrew Ross Sorkin. He has an exchange with Trump here.
Mr. President, what kind of teeth, though, are in those investments? What kind of teeth are in those investments, meaning that would force the EU to make those investments? If they don't make those investments, what happens on the other side?
Well, then they pay tariffs of 35%. No, they brought down their tariffs. So they paid $600 billion, and because of that, I reduced their tariffs from 30% down to 15%. And a couple of countries came, how come EU is paying less than us? And I said, well, because they gave me $600 billion. And that's a gift. That's not like, a loan, by the way. That's not a loan that, 3 years comes up, we have to pay it back. There's nothing to pay back. They gave us $600 billion that we can invest in anything we want.
Total lie. Absolute lie. Nothing to support or corroborate that whatsoever. It's just so shocking. It really is that he's just lying his ass off about these figures. He just keeps doubling down on it in real time. As Ron Filipowski notes, this is complete fantasy, just an absurd made-up lie. The EU is not giving Trump $600 billion to invest any way I want. They aren't giving him $1 to invest. It's just astonishing that any president can go on a financial network and lie like that, and it barely registers. And it's just true. I wish Sorkin would push back more. Oh, man. This interview is long, by the way. We actually had to take clips because we'd been here for 40 minutes. Here's another clip in which Trump talks about how he's going to lower the cost of pharmaceuticals.
Chips and semiconductors. But on pharmaceuticals, we'll be putting a initially small tariff on pharmaceuticals. But in 1 year,
President
1.5 years maximum, it's going to go to 150%, and then it's going to go to 250%, because we want pharmaceuticals made in our country. And that's not the CHIPS Act like Biden did, because he didn't know what he was doing, where they gave billions of dollars to companies that had more money.
So Trump is convinced that he's going to cause the creation of manufacturing of pharmaceutical production here in this country. We have no reason to believe it's going to happen, but notice how he concedes he is tariffing the shit out of pharmaceuticals coming from other countries, which means Americans will be paying more for their drugs. Period. Absolutely.
Yeah, Mr. President, you've talked about you want success, not retribution. The Justice Department now tapping a grand jury to look into the intelligence community's assessment of what was happening with Russia. Is that you have nothing to do with directing the Justice Department?
No, I have nothing to do. Pam is doing a great job. I have nothing to do with it. I will tell you this. They deserve it. I was happy to hear it. I actually read it just like you did. I have nothing to do with it. But what they did in the election...
Trump has publicly, repeatedly demanded the prosecutions of President Obama, President Clinton, Hillary Clinton, James Comey, Brennan, and so many others as well. I had nothing to do with it. When you publicize your preferences to a sycophantic attorney general, yes, you are obviously connected. Just imagine how people would have reacted if Joe Biden had tweeted, I want Donald Trump to be prosecuted, and then the next day or within 2 days, then Attorney General Merrick Garland prosecuted Trump. We'd be like, holy shit, you're ordering the DOJ to go after your political opponents. Now, that never happened because President Biden was morally superior to Donald Trump on his worst day than Trump at his best. But this idea that there's no relationship between Trump and the DOJ with respect to the prosecutions of his political opponents beggars belief. It strains credulity.
What they did in even the last election, but it was too big to rig. But what they did in the 2020 election is grotesque. I mean, that was a rigged election, 100%.
Okay, we can't relitigate that. We can't relitigate that.
No, we're back to rigging again. Well, you can use it because everyone...
So Joe's desperately trying to change the subject. we can't talk about the election being rigged because it wasn't rigged. It wasn't rigged, and he has to. He's in the uncomfortable position of having to push back on Trump in that respect. There are other clips we might just do. I think we're probably gonna do another video about this because otherwise this one's gonna go on for like 45 minutes. I mean, I'm telling you guys, Trump. This is one of Trump's very worst interviews. Again, it says something that even MAGA Joe Kernan has to repeatedly push back and fact check him on live TV, much to his own visible discomfort. But there you have it. We'll discuss the rest in a subsequent video because they can discuss a wide array of topics. But in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.